Hi, welcome to Teacher Takeaways from SIGCSE 2022 Tech Symposium. This is the first of the professional learning series for the spring 2022 season, hosted by Computer Science Teachers Association, CSTA. My name is Lily Mora. I'm a professional learning manager at CSTA, and I'm joined by Jason Borer. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Bohr. I work with chapters and chapter leaders here at CSTA.
Awesome. We're so glad you're here. Like I had mentioned, this is the very first of this new season of professional learning. We're starting us off with takeaways from the SIGCSE Tech Symposium that happened a little over a month ago. Yeah, and it was early March, right? And then later this month, we are going to feature, it's called Let Them Be Heard. It's an Asian Pacific Panel and Heritage Month resources to celebrate Asian Pacific History Month. On the 11th of May, we are featuring the LGBTQ plus panel and history resources to celebrate Pride History Month, and it's titled Outstanding Voices. And then we usually wrap up our season of professional learning with a code and play where you can come and check out a different platform, collaborate with your colleagues, and hopefully produce something that you might want to use with your students. So we're really excited about this season. We've pared it down a lot because we understand that it's that time of the year where there's so much going on. Lots of testings are taking place. And so we wanted to make sure that everything that we did was very intentional. So we do hope that we see you at a future professional learning event series. So today is the teacher takeaways from SIGCSE 2022 Tech Symposium. Today is Tuesday, April 12th, 2022. So in the chat, we would love for you to introduce yourself, your location, and because we're in spring, what needs spring cleaning? What needs spring cleaning? So for example, my name is Lily Mora. I'm tuning in from Vallejo, California. That's in the northern part, very close to Berkeley. And spring cleaning for me is my office desk that I will not show anyone until spring cleaning is over. We are curious, everyone. Steve says the entire house. One of the Melissas says the laundry room. We have a few Melissas in the house, everyone. The Melissas are winning. Another Melissa says the garage needs cleaning. Jason's getting ready for barbecue season. Love it, love it. The dining room in Maryland for Diane's house needs cleaning. Under the deck. All right, that's for Eric and Ari. Marianne says the house, the whole house. Yes, same here too. Jeff is saying what doesn't need to be cleaned. Nimi says jewelry collection. Ooh, very specific. This is cool. So Todd says the spice cabinet. I think my cupboards also need spring cleaning too. So thank you for sharing with us. This is nice to know I'm not the only one that doesn't have time right now to do all these things. For those of you, we hope, I mean, when was spring break? Did it happen? Are you in spring break right now? Or are you waiting for it and it's not soon enough? Some of you are currently on spring break and I am very jealous. So we all have different spring breaks, and regardless of when your spring break is happening, you are here and we are so honored for you all to join us. Today's session is going to run as follows. After this welcome activity, we're going to quickly and briefly talk about what SIGCSE is and what the Tech Symposium that happens every year. We have a featured presentation, something that really caught traction at the event, brought to you by two of our colleagues from UC Berkeley. And then we're going to wrap it up with some teacher takeaways that's going to allow you an opportunity to take a look at some of the resources, explore, and then share back out if what you liked about it, what you learned, and if it's something that's worth using with your students now or sometime in the future. So this one's a little different than the previous ones, but we're hoping that this is going to be engaging and that you find something useful that's going to help your CS classes. Okay, so SIGCSE stands for it's SIGCSE, and it's a special interest group for computer science education. So this provides a forum for educators to discuss the development, implementation, and evaluation of computing programs, curricula, courses, which include syllabi, labs, and teaching and pedagogy. And they have these different events throughout the year. And one of those events is the Tech Symposium, and it happens usually between February and March. And it basically allows computer science research to come to the forefront, where they address some problems that are common among CS educators. They get to share some new ideas, and then also interact with like some technical sessions. So maybe it's like a new platform that they want to introduce to the world, and that you have the opportunity to learn more about it and explore with your colleagues. And so we have an awesome honor to bring to the floor two presenters that were at the SIGCSE event this year at the Tech Symposium, and they are going to present on That's What Science Is, all this data, and they're going to feature coding data visualizations in middle school science classrooms. Today we have Eric Greenwald and Ari Krakowski. Ari, I'm just hoping I'm saying your name right. Okay, perfect. So Eric Greenwald is the Director of Assessment and Analytics for the Learning Design Group. He also serves as a co-principal investigator in collaboration with the National Writing Project and SRI on a Department of Education grant to support teacher practice in evidence-based science writing. Ari is the digital apps lead for the Learning Design Group. She leads the team in developing simulations and creating supporting science content. So without further ado, let's welcome our two presenters.
Hi. Hello. Can you hear us all right? We don't have headsets, so we're gonna share screen in a moment. Oh, I think, yeah.
Oops, that's not what I want to do. Sorry.
That. Can you see our screen all right?
Awesome.
Okay, and I don't think we can see the chat, so if we're like running over time or something, just like go like that. We can see you, Lily. Okay, so I'm Ari, that's Eric, and the project that we're talking about today was funded by the National Science Foundation, so you can learn more about it on their website. And I just kind of wanted to get right to it. So the overarching goal of our coding science internships project is to broaden participation in computer science pathways and academic and career pathways. So the first way we think about doing this is integrating it into core science classrooms. Because they're core classes, everybody takes them. They're not electives or active after school programs and things like that. So everybody takes the class, and that means that people kids that maybe like didn't see themselves as into computer science, have the opportunity to be exposed to hopefully really great learning experiences. And so that's kind of the second part. We know from the literature that just putting coding in front of kids doesn't necessarily change anything. So we need to really think about how to design instruction so that it's activating and engaging a broader spectrum of kids. And then it's critical that curriculum be designed so that it maximizes the chances for uptake at scale. So if you're going to put it into science classrooms, you really need to make sure that it's something that science teachers feel belongs in their classroom and meets their needs. Let me go back one more. Okay, so the unit we're going to be talking about today is the one on the left, the Investigating Air Quality Unit. So that's one of the two units that we developed through the Coding Science Internships Project. And we developed these units in partnership with Amplify Education. So the Amplify Education made Amplify Science, which Eric and I were both a big part of developing. And these 2 units will ultimately be part of the comprehensive K-8 science program. The first unit, the Coral Restoration Unit, is already commercially available. The second unit that we're talking about today has gone through research trials and then ultimately will be revised to be released broadly, probably next year sometime. Okay, so there are 3 core pedagogical strategies that we're going to be talking about today, and these really overarching throughout the design of the whole unit, both units. The first one is real world problems to drive the learning experience. The second is authentic integration of science and computer science concepts and practices like computational thinking. So we refer to that as CTS a lot. If we say that, that's what we mean. I don't know. Hopefully we won't use too many acronyms. And then the last is multimodal learning experiences to promote conceptual depth of understanding. And we'll talk more about what we mean by that in a little bit. So we drew on these pedagogical strategies, which you see there on the left side, to design the integrated, there it is, CTS learning experiences in the middle. And our design-based research study that we presented at SIGSCE investigated the effect of the curriculum on student learning gains, as well as dispositional changes, specifically competency beliefs and valuing STEM. Okay, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the second unit, the Investigating Air Quality unit. That's the focus of our experience report, which we're happy to drop a PDF in the link to when we're done and if you want to take a closer look. And then we're going to look at each one of those pedagogical strategies in this unit and share some insights from the implementation in the research study. Okay, so as I mentioned a minute ago, a core goal of the instructional model is exposure to computation as a valuable and powerful practice in science endeavors. So to address this goal, we drew on problem-based learning approaches, which maybe many of you have already heard a lot about. And we know that from a growing body of research that many students who don't express interest in computer science, particularly those that are historically marginalized in computer science pathways, they often say that they're not interested in computer science because they are interested in pursuing work that addresses meaningful societal problems. And so even though coding and computer science definitely do address those problems, there is a disconnect in what kids perceive about what coding can accomplish. So we are aiming to situate the learning experiences right directly around compelling real world problems like air quality, so that we can help students expand their perceptions about what computing can help them achieve and have coding become a powerful tool to do things they already find value in. So the focal real world problem in this unit is air quality. So students are working with a large air quality data set derived from a full year of air quality index monitoring data from the US EPA. And since this is a national data set, it really provided opportunities for local relevance, like anywhere a student was, they can look at their place, their state, their city, or their nearest sensor, and kind of just dig in on what the air quality is like there, or somewhere where a lot of kids looked up places they had traveled or where their family members lived. And you can imagine this is a huge data set. So it really just was very obvious to students and teachers that you really needed coding to engage with it. Like there's no way you can kind of squint your eyes at this vast table of data and make sense of it at all. So students analyze the air quality data set and they code data visualizations like the one you see kind of in the middle there, using a custom visual programming environment that is also right there in the middle. And you can see some of the blocks there. And that tool is called Data Studio. And students kind of identify locations that have air quality problems, and then they use the data analysis tools in the programming environment to analyze what the air quality problems are like. And then they learn about the science of air pollution alongside that. And the unit kind of ends with them making recommendations about a specific place that they've identified about what they can do to address their air quality problems. So in talking to teachers and students, we heard overwhelmingly that the air quality problem was a key piece of engaging students in the learning and motivating them to persist through what was sometimes very challenging and or just challenging because it was new to science classrooms and a lot of the students had never coded before. This picture is what our, here in the West Coast, what our sky looked like in 2020 in the fall. When maybe you saw this in headlines from other places. It was just the sun didn't rise one day because there was so much smoke blocking it. And so most of the kids in our research trial were along the West Coast in a few different states. So this was really close to their lived experience. We're actually very curious to see what it would be like for kids who live in places where maybe air quality and fires aren't a part of their day-to-day life like they are here. But for the kids in this study, it really brought them in. So yeah. We struggled to find a data set that would actually be compelling to middle school students, and so that something they cared about, and then something that they could actually make sense of. Structuring and presenting the data in interpretable ways was also a challenge. So we really wanted to think carefully about the column headers, and we kind of did some cleaning and renaming of variables and things like that to make it more accessible to student inquiry. And the other thing an insight from the research was that it was really critical to provide real opportunities for students to just kind of press all the buttons and explore all of the data without preset questions. Yeah. Okay, so the second pedagogical strategy relates to this disciplinary integration piece of computational thinking and science. So a central priority of the coding science internship model is this authentic integration of CT and science, and to make sure that it's designed for feasible and scalable implementation in science classrooms. So to realize this, it's critical that the model appreciate the instructional priorities of formal science classrooms. So first, student engagement with computation needs to be authentic to the way scientists use computation. So all scientists now use computation in their work. They don't think of themselves as computer scientists, but they definitely code because all science involves big data now. And so it's not too hard to actually accomplish this, but we're wanting to do this in ways that really mirror the ways that science professionals employ computation in their work. Second, to make the uptake in science classrooms possible, the computational thinking learning needs to be in service of the science learning. It needs to do work for the science classrooms. Teachers have a huge number of standards that they have to cover, and this really needs to appear or feel to them as something that's not added on, but is really truly synergistic with the teaching that they're already doing. And then relatedly, because of all those huge numbers of standards that science teachers need to address within their 1 year, the constraints on instructional time were also really important. So we designed each unit to be 10 45-minute lessons to make them feasible for uptake. And that was kind of something that we did a little bit of range finding with to come at that. And so that's about 2 weeks of curriculum. And that was something that science teachers felt like, yeah, that I could work this in, and it's not and I'll still be able to meet all of my other goals. This slide shows the learning goals for this unit. It's kind of dense, and it's a figure that's actually in the paper. So if you want to take a closer look at it, you can look at the PDF. And we structured the learning goals to really position coding as a tool to enable this deep engagement with the science practice of analyzing and interpreting data, which is one of the 8 science and engineering practices in the next generation science standards that really a lot of teachers, most teachers are structuring their curriculum around. So students interact with the data set, and then they use code to do different kinds of data moves, querying the data, filtering it, exploring it, grouping data, and then creating data visualizations. And this learning goals are kind of framed in a way that this is how scientists do the same thing. Here you can see a more detailed overview of the science and CT learning foci for the unit. So you can see the science learning there in orange and the CT learning down below in purple. So we're not going to go through every detail here, but this is is this in our paper? I can't remember if this is a figure, but happy to share it with you if it's not in the paper. We already mentioned that students engage in computational thinking to analyze and interpret data. And alongside that CT learning, students are also learning a lot about the molecular composition of air. So what is healthy air like? How does it differ from air that has pollutant molecules in it or particulate matter? And then they learn about the health impacts of different pollutants on body systems and the ways that human activity can cause the air quality problems and also result in solutions to those problems. So that touches on a bunch of different science standards that we know well from working on the science curriculum. And the third pedagogical strategy relates to the use of multimodal learning experiences to help kids build understanding of key concepts. And so what we mean by multimodal, that provides students with multiple and iterative opportunities to engage in different learning modalities, to different ways of learning to support their developing understanding of the core concepts. So students engage in 3 modalities in the unit. Coding tasks, of course, in the visual programming environment that I mentioned before. And those are some open-ended tasks. And then we also have some worked examples that students compare side by side to run and sort of make sense of how the different solutions are varying. There's some unplugged activities that are hands-on or whole body where kids kind of move around the classroom or working with tangible manipulatives. And then there's a discourse routine that is a very structured student-to-student discussion that they use with the coding tasks together to support their understanding. So this slide kind of just illustrates kind of a collection of these multimodal learning experiences. And this particular collection is focused on how students or helping students build understanding of Boolean operators in code and how they can instruct a computer to filter the data set through the use of 3 code blocks that in Data Studio. So we have include data if, which you can see it's kind of a light blue block there. That's a natural language analog of the traditional filter command. And then there's the and block and the or block that most people are probably familiar with. And students engage in these open-ended coding tasks. You can see one on the bottom left there. And then the comparative worked examples are on the bottom right. That's what we called a critiquing code task. That's what it was called to students and teachers. And so they could run that whole block of code, group A and group B code, and compare the different examples, make predictions about what they were thinking might happen. And then this whole kind of sequence was kicked off by this unplugged activity shown in the top left, where students, leveraging their familiarity with playing cards, they had a whole class activity where they created a playing card data set where each kid had 1 card and they kind of filled out a row of the data set that you see there with suit color and number. And then the teacher has these very large whiteboard laminated blocks that are on the board that you can write on. And if your card is included in the command there, so if your card was red and greater than the number 3, you would step from the perimeter of the room to the center of the room. So students could really, and then they run through like a bunch of cycles of those. And we designed those cycles to kind of illustrate some of the pain points that we observed when we were developing the unit and working with students about the trickiness of and or, and how those words are really different in code than they are in just natural language. It's stuck.
Yeah.
Should we exit? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Next one. Yeah. Sorry, it's hanging on slides. So in talking to teachers, it was clear that Boolean operators were new to most of the middle school science students in our study, and new to many of the science teachers. And their role in so much of computer science, it was clear that building competence with the logic that Boolean operators impose was an important place for deeper engagement. And in talking to teachers, many indicated that attending to a conceptual understanding of the logic of Boolean operators was really important for their students' learning, and to help them think computationally. And these quotes kind of illustrate what we were hearing from teachers. Okay. So our key sort of findings here. Oh, shoot, sorry.
Oh, I need to do this.
Yeah,
There we go.
sorry. One is that unplugged activities enabled students to take the vantage point of the computer. So through that card activity, they could sort of get inside the computer and really engage with the computational logic there. Another thing is that a focus on conceptual depth and high support, that combination enabled what teachers refer to as productive struggle around challenging ideas. And this was something we saw again and again in observations and talking to teachers, that when we paired this attention on real conceptual depth with a lot of support, multimodal experiences, that sort of thing, we saw multiple examples of this productive struggle. And finally, this multimodal engagement really helped to level the playing field. In a science class, middle school science class especially, you have kids who obviously have different levels of science. But if you think about the differences in their computer science background, it's vast. You know, some kids come in, they've taken coding courses outside of class and all that sort of thing. They come in, they're really quite competent, and other kids have never coded before. And so it was really important to level the playing field so that all kids could really learn the material, see themselves as coder. And we also found this provided a useful schema for kids who didn't have a lot of coding background. So we also had this activity set of experiences which we called thinking in rows to support conceptual understanding of a tall data set structure. And this is in part because the way data tables are thought about and manipulated and worked upon in computer science is different from the ways they're traditionally used in science classrooms, which tend to use sort of small data sets that are wide and not tall, where the data sets are more used as almost a way to display and communicate information rather than as a data set to query and run analyses through. And so recognizing that tall data sets are more amenable to computational data moves. And so instructional resources and discussions really aimed at helping students think in rows to understand data set structure. And you can kind of see how we really broke down what a data table, like how it's functioning from a computational perspective, like what a column is and how different code operates on a column, and what a row is and how a different kind of code operates at the row level, and how different columns hold different information. Like this was a big focus because it was clearly an important place for us to spend time. So as an example of this, we see, this should be a GIF? No. Next one. Okay. So thinking in rows also helps students to synthesize the variables in the data set into cases. And so this helps make what is very abstract to students more concrete, connected, and understandable. In one activity, students talk with a partner and describe a single row in a sentence, including each variable in their description. For example, with this highlighted row, a student would describe the row as, in week 1 in Tucson, Arizona, the AQI for PM 2.5 was 115. So this practice helped them get an understanding of structure. So student interactions with Data Studio, the visual programming environment, help support this conceptual understanding as well. That tall data sets are more amenable to computational analyses. Students in the left GIF, you can see them load and explore the AQI data set. And through that exploration, they discover that, and you can see this on the right, the variable code blocks, the blue hexagons, each represent a column of data in the data set. And this allows students to see how variables are related to the data table columns and instruct the computer to conduct specific data moves that permit analysis and visualization. Students also had access to other data sets that they could explore to further build and apply their computational data practice skills. For example, this was a data set about burritos. GitHub has a lot of fun data sets out there, that, and some of them are really nice to use with kids. And so we had some opportunities for kids to just kind of play with data once they developed some tools. And so this deeper understanding of data set structure is intended to support students in visualizing what control structures in their code are instructing the computer to do. For example, students' conceptual understanding of Boolean logic builds off their work with thinking in rows as they make sense of the structure of the air quality data set. They begin to understand and develop facility with Boolean operators, and that enables them to specify which rows to include in order to code a data visualization that answers the specific question. The code blocks in the data studio, we also included a visual block glossary to provide real-time support for understanding how the Boolean operators interact with the data, and offer an example of a resultant data visualization from their use in code. So this block glossary was a really useful resource for kids. When a student is figuring out how to code a graph that will show data for a specific city and a specific pollutant, they can visualize the rows of the data table and use the natural language and the Boolean operator blocks for support. In this way, students can imagine the computer grabbing only rows that include both the city name and the pollutant name they are interested in. Using the language of the block, the student might reason, I want to tell the computer to include data if the row contains a particular city and PM 2.5 here in New York City. We also provided direct instruction aimed at helping students understand the story of a datum. We learned from classroom pilots that students needed support understanding that a row in the data table represented an actual pollutant measurement in a given time frame. So class discussion around the visuals in this slide back up from the data table to the sensor, where lots of kids have never seen a sensor before or have a understanding of what it is or what it does, and then all the way back to the source of pollution. So making that transfer from something in the real world to an entry in a data table was another important learning for the kids. And insights from teachers suggest that this conceptual scaffolding to connect the story of a datum and how those data are structured to support analyses was critical to support student reasoning about data moves and enabled analysis of large data sets and the relationship of those data to data visualizations. Attention to the structure of a data set as a computational object proved important for student facility with producing meaningful visual representations of their data. Part of this came in presenting the pain point of a massive data set. As Ari was mentioning earlier, just seeing that giant scroll of going all the way through, and they're still in Alabama because they haven't gotten to the bees yet, was really important for kids to get a sense of, well, why use a computer in the first place? And part of it also came with attention to how the values were generated, how it's reflected in the way the data are structured, how computational data moves are made possible through that structure to enable analysis. And so I'm recognizing that we're really running toward the end of our allotted time. So I'm just going to give a highlight of findings really quickly, maybe take 3 more minutes. Is that all right?
You're good on time, Eric. Don't worry about it.
Okay, great. So the core research questions that we have been looking at are the extent to which participating students increase facility with computational thinking. So that was sort of our main effect study. And alongside of that, we are also interested in the extent to which we saw evidence of positive dispositional change towards STEM and CS. So basically, were these experiences positioning kids along the pathway toward CS academic and career pathways? And so for you measurement folks out there, this is what we drew on. Our computational thinking measure was drawn from work at Pitt by Chris Shun, his lab, and the assessment of computational thinking. It's done a number of studies with middle school age students with robotics, and has good reliability. And then we also drew on 2 measures from the activation lab. It's a suite of measures. One was competency beliefs for STEM, which we revised to focus on computer science. And the other was valuing STEM, which is basically the value students assigned to STEM knowledge and STEM work. And so we switched that, revised that to focus more on computer science as well. This is our study. It's a big slide with a lot of information, but the key thing is that we ran this study 3 large research trials with over 600 students in each. 2 research trials on a computational modeling based unit, which we haven't talked about, and the more recent one that actually happened in the middle of the pandemic was the data focused one. And so the highlight finding from this is that across all 3 trials, we saw a statistically significant gain in computational thinking, comparing students pre to post. And this was pretty consistent. It was a small effect size, but again, given that we're talking about a grand total of about 7-8 hours of instruction, this is we're pretty happy with that. And then we also saw really large effects for the dispositional values. So for competency beliefs in particular, for both research trials where we measured it, we saw an effect size around 1, which, you know, as you may know, is quite large. For values, we saw contrasting results. We saw statistically significant gains in values in both cases, but it was definitely more muted with the data science one. But, you know, again, this was a study that happened in the middle of the pandemic. We also think that kids sort of started out valuing this content higher because they had just experienced wildfires and they knew that they were about to learn about air quality. So there may have been some ceiling effect action going on there. So anyway, that's the main outcome of the study. I'm gonna just, it's a giant table of F values and that sort of thing, ANOVA. Basically, we look to make sure that these gains weren't being disproportionately realized. So making sure there weren't any subgroup differences that reflected a bias. And we didn't see anything that would reflect a bias in the pre or post samples. What we did see in 2 cases were places where the learning gains were more pronounced. In one case for female identifying and non-binary identifying students, they increased, had a statistically significantly larger increase in competency beliefs. And in one study, we saw a similar trend among BIPOC students. And we did just a binary BIPOC, non-BIPOC split to make sense of that. And so again, while these were small differences, the broadening participation was a core goal of our instructional design. So seeing that we did see these more pronounced learning gains for groups traditionally minoritized in STEM was really encouraging. And so this is the sort of basic theory of action that Ari pointed to earlier. And if we go to the next slide, yeah, this is just our sort of theory of action for our instructional model. And you see the strategies that we talked about on the left side. And then in understanding the role that those strategies play, their contribution to the learning experience, we really landed on this idea of disciplinary authenticity as being incredibly important. And that sort of promoted teacher buy-in to try some of these risky ideas. Again, these are science teachers teaching coding in their science classroom in middle school. So this is not something that many were familiar with. And also related to that, the personal authenticity, the meaningfulness of the material and the questions that were being asked to students was hugely important. And that promoted a student's investment in the learning experience and in learning challenging content, that productive struggle that we talked about earlier. And so this sort of dual buy-in seemed to be really important to promote the outcomes that we observed as reported earlier. So that is us in a nutshell. And we're here to take any questions or find out more. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Eric and Ari. This is amazing. Throughout the presentation, there were a lot of positive comments about how folks, this is like perfect timing for the end of the unit for some of their 8th grade students. And then also you had a teacher from Malaysia who's going to adopt some of these ideas for their projects using CS plus Python for their 9th graders. There were a few questions that I wanted to call out that were earlier. Is what program did you use to collect the data or to pull that data? Was that because it had like similar to Scratch, and then someone said, did you use Google Data Studio for this? Do you know it?
So the program to get the data, there was no program. We just got it straight from the EPA and did a bunch of cleaning.
Yeah, I think, you know, our dev team, you know, they probably pulled it into R and did their thing with it. But the program Data Studio is not Google Data Studio. It's just what we named it. I don't know if Data Studio was around yet from Google, but we just liked that name. And so it's an Amplify developed tool. They use Scratch blocks on the back end, and then they use a different interpreter, like a Java interpreter, for the design. So they really wanted to kind of put their own design elements to it that's sort of cohesive with the other like simulations and other digital tools in the curriculum. And the other thing that it was tricky about just using something like Scratch or Snap, which Snap can do a lot of this stuff, but it, you know, you have to curate it and create like little learning environments where it so that you're not seeing like all the blocks, which I think for a novice teacher in a science class and students that haven't coded before, we've found can be a little overwhelming. But that's possible in Snap. I don't know if it's possible in Scratch.
So another question is, can this be modified with another local pressing issue like drinking water quality or river PCBs, etc.? So
that's like where we want to go next.
Yeah, we have an NSF proposal in to do exactly that.
And we're actually really interested in working with teachers in what NSF refers to as an RPP, a research practitioner partnership. Probably a lot of you have heard of that, because this is working with data practices like data moves and things like that, and with science classrooms in particular, is pretty novel. And I think the field really doesn't know how to do it yet. And there's, for us, it really intersects with our sort of core research goals around broadening participation in STEM. And so we feel like these other data sets are just really great for using, you know, intersecting with culturally relevant pedagogy and sustaining pedagogy in classrooms. And teachers are really into it, and they're into that feature of it. And we're just kind of really wanting to dig in with teachers, use the pedagogical approaches that we found success with from this unit, but do it in a free tool that is not Amplify. I mean, the Amplify curriculum is awesome. We love it. We help make it. So it means a lot to us, but we also really want this to be broadly available to any teacher. So hit us up if you want to work with us. We'd love it.
Well, there's definitely a lot of traction here. So there's a handful more questions. Are you okay with us asking them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. What is your experience with other data visualization tools like Tableau for middle school?
Yeah, sure. So I'll say we have minimal experience, or I have minimal experience with using those directly with middle schoolers. I think we tried some things out, small piloting, that sort of thing. And what we couldn't find anything at the time that we made this that enabled us to help kids get underneath the visualization to understand the programming involved in a way that was also accessible for novice coders. So there were some great things that, like, you could really dive into the code, and there's some really great stuff there, but it seemed to me more advanced than we could use. And then other stuff, like CodeApp is another resource that do some really wonderful visualization tools, but the programming is all hidden. It's sort of completely behind the scenes, and so we needed that intersection.
Michelle Wilkerson does some interesting work with that. So you could take a look at her work. They're using CodeApp, and she has a partnership with Concord Consortium to
Awesome.
play with that.
Along those lines of like the comfort level with code, did many of the teachers that participated have any prior experience with CS or coding?
So we had a range of districts. From one district where they had been integrating computational thinking across the disciplines for years. And so those teachers definitely did. And then another couple of districts where there was the complete opposite. So I think teachers were actually incredibly nervous in that district. And then the pandemic came too. So we ended up having office hours with teachers. Sometimes they would text us like, I mean, they were like, this is crazy. Well, I don't know how to work this. And we, so it was very unfamiliar. And if it weren't a pandemic, we would have been there in the classroom I think that would have been even more helpful than office hours. But so it was really a wide range. Mm-hmm. But one thing I wanted to say is that even the teachers that had prior experience, like the students, the prior coding experience tends to be around like kind of robotics type moves, like loops and sequencing and conditionals. The data practices are they're kind of new for everybody. I think that'll change in the next few years, but right now, that's a weird sort of leveling of the playing field in itself.
Is there a way for those who are not using Amplify curriculum to access this lesson?
No,
Let's via Amplify.
But come help us develop it.
And then also, are you open to sharing the slides of the presentation? Is that something?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and so let me know that I can send that follow-up to our participants.
Yeah, we'll send as a PDF and the paper as well.
Yeah,
I saw that.
Excellent. Are there any chances of you offering PD sessions to K-12 teachers?
Sure. We don't have anything planned right now. We don't have any sessions sort of scheduled or anything like that. But that's something that we've been thinking about doing. It's been part of some of the grants that we've been either submitted or have been devising. So if that's if that's something that would be interesting in, that seems cool. So yeah,
you definitely have a following here.
What's that?
You definitely have a following here.
Right.
Yeah, we have, both Ari and I have done a lot of PL workshops and that sort of thing for science and a little bit of CS as well. So yeah, it's exciting, and we'd love to stay in touch around that.
Excellent. Well, we would like to thank you all, the two of you, for coming out and speaking to us and sharing your findings. And even the lesson itself is really has drawn a lot of attention from our group. And we are so grateful that you were here to share the wealth of knowledge that you've gained from this research. So thank you so much. We hope that you continue with this research, and that with different lessons, or even, the grade levels even, we would love to continue to see how it's expanding and how it's really changing even the perception of students so that we can really broaden that participation in computing. So thank you so much.
Thanks
Great.
for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Okay, great, thank you. For those of you stay on, because I wanted to share some of the other resources that we found at the SIGSE that you want to consider. Eric and Ari, you're welcome to stay, but we just want to thank you again. Thank you so much. Okay, excellent. Okay, we're going to, bye.
Bye.
Okay, so folks, if you are still willing to hang out, there are some other resources we wanted to draw your attention to. We're just going to introduce them to you, and then you can do with it what you wish. Jason, is it okay if you share the slide deck, just in case those of them didn't grab it from earlier? Let me get to that slide. Thank you, Jason. So we're going to show you a few of the cool things that we found at SIGSE. So, and then something that some of you may have heard of, I've heard at least one chapter's already featured that at the meetings, is Gather.town. It's an interactive virtual space. It gamifies this experience of like, and even allows you to kind of manage what's happening with your students. This is ideal for like the virtual classroom, but even if students don't want to physically move from their chair and be able to work with another classmate, but for you to know who's working with who, this is something worth trying. On this slide, you'll be able to click the title and then it'll take you to the resource. An assessment tool is Visual Studio Code, which is a code review tool for program grading. So if this is something that you're looking for, definitely check Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to keep going through. So some curricula and tools, we have 4 of them for you all. We have CodeTune. CodeTune is a comic generator that uses Python or Blockly. It's currently in its beta test, but it still works. You could tell too, because the graphics aren't that intricate. For example, here it's like coding a comic based on an alarm clock. And you can see it's kind of like, you could tell that they quickly did this, but because they're still working out these kinks, but you can use it now. The link is on there if you'd like to try it out. There's also tutorials that'll support you in that process of story building. And then at the end, making it like a comic. And then we also have Stripe, that's with a Y, STRYPE. It is a frame-based editor for Python, offering programming for microbits. If that's something that you're looking for, check it out. Then we have NetsBlocks. NetsBlocks is a programming language based on Scratch and Snap that supports collaborative editing. And something else that NetsBlocks offers is Roboscape. Roboscape is their cybersecurity education, and they cover the units of NetsBlocks programming, general robotics with Roboscape, attacks and attack detection, denial of service, encryption, key cracking, insecure key exchange, and replay attack. So if you're looking to like amp up what you have, or you want to try something new with any of these topics, consider using what NetsBlocks created using in their Roboscape curriculum. Okay, so in a nutshell, that is some of the cool stuff that we found at SIGSE. All of the links are there. If we had time today, we would allow you in this space to explore and report back, but because we're like inching towards the end, we just want to get through this so then you can play and figure out what might be useful for your spaces. We would love for you to complete the event survey. By doing so, you would provide us feedback on today's webinar and our presenters, and then you would automatically receive a certificate of completion via email once you hit submit. And thank you, Jason, for putting in the Slack. I appreciate that so much. Some of the upcoming CSD events include on the 21st of this month, April, is our Engage, our monthly Engage, and it's featuring CS K-12 Student Standards Audit Panel. And then at the end of the month, on the 27th of April, we're going to start preparing for Asian Pacific Heritage Month. by providing a panel of Asian Pacific CS folks and some resources to help out with that. And it's titled Let Them Be Heard. And then on the 11th of May, we have Outstanding Voices, which features an LGBTQ plus panel and Pride History Month resources. We have another Engage in May that has to be scheduled, and we'll make sure you all know about that before that. But come June on the 6th, we are going to preview the CSTA Summer Conference, which is very exciting. And then we wrap up our last PLS for the school year on the 15th with a Code and Play. Code and Play is becoming really popular. Every time we're getting more and more folks to come and enjoy coding and learning a new platform, or just collaborating with your colleagues on building projects that you might want to consider using with your students. But really, it's just for fun for teachers. So we hope that you enjoyed today and that you learned something from our presenters, or you found a resource that you might want to check out. Definitely fill out that survey for us so that we can get you that credit for your time for being here. That's a wrap for us. We hope that you join us for any of the upcoming events. Remember, this is a series of professional learning that starts today, and it's going to run through mid-June. So we're excited for you to come back and to join us for an upcoming event. All right. Thank you, everyone.